My name is Claire Dawson. At 35, I was supposed to marry Bradley Cross, a brilliant surgeon. We had planned a lavish wedding reception, and we had been in constant contact every day to prepare for it. But just before the reception, the wedding planner came to the dressing room holding a smartphone. Her face was filled with confusion and, strangely, even a hint of pity. She handed it over to me and said, "Please take a look." Curious and uneasy, I glanced at the screen. There, I saw my best friend Gabriella with my fiancé Bradley. Not only that, but also Bradley's friends, who were supposed to be attending the reception today, were in the video. They were in the middle of a party. When I called Bradley, he answered, laughing loudly. "I'm not coming over there," he said. When I asked him what he meant, he simply replied that he wasn't going to get married. "Oh, and by the way," he added, "the reception costs and the engagement ring are on your credit card." Then he hung up. I was utterly confused. When I asked the planner what was going on, she explained that Bradley had asked her to play this video at the reception, but she couldn't bring herself to do so without checking with me first. As I stood there, stunned, my parents noticed and looked at the smartphone screen. My father exclaimed, "What is this?" In the video, Bradley was saying, "I never intended to marry you in the first place." And yet, she totally fell for it. Claire is such a fool. I can't believe she's managed to get this far in life. All the guests I invited are here partying with me. You guys over there can make the most of it. At least enjoy the fancy food, so it doesn't go to waste. My father, holding back his anger, told the planner, "Go ahead and play the video at the reception." The wedding planner was at a loss for what to do. This was clearly an unprecedented accident. Meanwhile, the relatives and friends had already gathered and were seated at the tables. "My apologies, but please go ahead and play this video at the venue," my father said to the planner. He left me in the dressing room and, along with my mother, went into the hall. In the reception hall, the guests were eagerly waiting for the bride and groom to make their grand entrance. Everyone was holding up their smartphones, ready to capture the moment. Suddenly, the large screen in the hall lit up, and the video started playing. There were murmurs of confusion. Why is there a video playing when the bride and groom aren't even here? But as soon as the content became clear, the room erupted in chaos. When the video ended, the hall fell silent. No one knew what to say, their heads down in awkwardness. Then my father stood up. He walked up to the stage, took the microphone, and said, "Due to these circumstances, today's wedding reception is canceled. However, we invite you to enjoy the meal we've prepared for you." After saying this, he bowed his head slightly and left the hall. Meanwhile, I remained in the dressing room, completely unaware of what was happening, crying uncontrollably. When my father returned, he was furious, his face twisted with anger. "Did you not know he was cheating on you?" he demanded. I tried to think back, but I had never suspected him. "I don't know, but I planned everything for this wedding on my own. The dress, the honeymoon, choosing our new home. I did it all myself," I said. "Didn't Bradley come?" I asked him to come, but he said he couldn't because he had patients waiting. He's a doctor who saves lives. And I told myself that was understandable. "I see. So that's when he was meeting that woman," my father said. It seemed like that might be true. Gabriella Foster had been my best friend since elementary school, and I had shared everything with her. I told her about my upcoming marriage, how Bradley was a successful doctor with a good income, and how kind he was. I had shared all the little details, even bragging about him many times. Now that I thought about it, every time I did, Gabriella's face seemed to show jealousy. I could never tell if she was genuinely disappointed or just pretending. If I had known then, I would have regretted it deeply. I had always believed that even if she might feel envious, she would never feel jealous. I thought to myself, how foolish I had been. As I wiped away my unstoppable tears, I said, "I'm so sorry for being such a mess, Dad, Mom." My mom embraced me, her defeated daughter, and reassured me, "You're not a mess. Don't ever think that." Then my usually gentle father said with anger and bitterness, "I'll have him kicked out of that hospital." But my father is just an employee at an ordinary company. There's no way he could actually do such a thing. He said it only to comfort me. Still, I felt ashamed of myself for making him say such words. This was supposed to be a special day, but everything had crumbled. It must have been my own naivety that led to this. That thought was unbearable. Sometime later, my father shared some news with me. I heard Bradley's been assigned to a remote area. What? The hospital director told me today, so there's no mistake. His new workplace is a small clinic in Utqiagvik, at the northernmost tip of Alaska. Bradley. How could he end up in such a place? I have no idea, but apparently there are hardly any patients, and he'll have plenty of idle days. It felt strange. Bradley was an exceptionally skilled surgeon. How could someone like him be sent to a small clinic in such a remote location? He always used to say, "If I ever left, this hospital would fall apart. There's no surgeon as skilled as I am." And yet, here he was, assigned to the middle of nowhere. I wondered if my father was saying this just to ease my heartache. It seems that place is a medically underserved area. Doctors have been sent there several times, but they all ended up quitting halfway. The locals often have to travel for hours to reach a big hospital in the city during emergencies. Then the people there must feel reassured to have Bradley, don't you think? Well, probably, if Bradley can manage to survive there. That was true. Bradley took great pride in being a surgeon. He often said that holding a scalpel and saving lives was the essence of being a doctor. But if he was moved to a small clinic in such a remote area, he might not even get the chance to hold a scalpel, let alone see patients. Do you think he can really handle being assigned to a place like that? There are no nurses there, so he'll have to do everything himself. That shouldn't be a problem for someone like him. But I'm surprised he accepted the assignment so easily. It was a direct order from the hospital director, framed as supporting underserved communities. If he had complained, he would have been risking termination. And he doesn't have the guts for that. Is that so? He knows that refusing would mean having to quit the hospital entirely. That's why he went to the remote clinic as ordered. If he didn't accept it, he would have resigned at that point. That makes sense. Did Gabriella go with him? Yes, Miss Gabriella Foster went along. They said they were starting a new life together. I see. Of course. What's wrong? Nothing. It's just that when you said you'd get him kicked out of the hospital, I let myself hope for a second. But I guess it's not going to happen. I feel petty for even thinking that. It's fine. When the remote assignment came up, I thought he might choose to resign voluntarily, but it seems he didn't have that kind of courage. He's probably thinking he'll be back at the main hospital in 2 or 3 years. He's coming back. So, in the end, those two are destined to be happy together. The thought of them being happy was unbearable. I knew it was wrong to harbor such negative thoughts, but I couldn't help it. I couldn't forgive them. A remote assignment felt like too easy a punishment. I wanted him to suffer as much as I had, but fate seemed to be on his and Gabriella's side. Just wait, my father said with a sly grin. I think it's good that he accepted the remote assignment. If he had not, simply kicking him out of the hospital wouldn't have been enough. This isn't just about that, Claire. This is a long-term plan. He smiled as if he were plotting something deeper. About a year later, I was summoned by my uncle, Thomas, the hospital director. Although I had met Thomas a few times before, I had no idea he was the director of the hospital. Thomas is the hospital director, I exclaimed in surprise. Well, I never talk about work, so it's not surprising you didn't know. By the way, I need you to deliver this to the clinic in Utqiagvik, he said, handing me a sealed envelope. This? Can't you just send it through the mail? I asked, puzzled. I'm sorry, but it's something important. Also, I want you to see how he's doing now. He'll probably be happy to see this, and it'll be good for you to see his reaction. Thomas explained. Why would seeing him happy be good for me? I couldn't understand at all. If anything, I wanted to see him suffering, pushed to the brink of despair. And to make matters worse, Gabriella would be there too. I would have to see her looking happy in a place that should have been mine. This would only serve to torment me further. Did Thomas understand this? Don't worry. Everything is going as planned, Thomas said cryptically, patting me on the shoulder. Unable to refuse his request, I begrudgingly carried my heavy heart all the way to Alaska. When I arrived, the clinic was located near the sea, offering a stunning view. But being at the northernmost tip of Alaska, the wind was bone-chillingly cold. Even though it was autumn in Chicago, there was already snow on the ground here. As I opened the door to the clinic, I found Bradley sitting in a chair in the consultation room, sporting an unkempt beard. His gloomy face and vacant eyes spoke volumes about his lack of enthusiasm. I couldn't imagine any patient feeling reassured by such a doctor. Hello, I greeted as I stepped inside. Bradley turned to look at me, his face lighting up with unexpected delight. Claire, what are you doing here? The hospital director asked me to check on you, I replied. I see. As you can see, there's no one here. I've only treated a handful of patients this entire year, he said bitterly. Why? Well, the population density is low to begin with. In emergencies, they go to big hospitals in the city. They're not going to bother with limited transportation just to see a doctor here. I see. Don't you visit the locals yourself to introduce yourself and build trust? Why would I do that? I'm a doctor, not a door-to-door salesman. He snapped. I get that, but in a remote area like this, you can't just sit around waiting. You need to make some effort, I replied. That's easy for you to say. I'm not some cheap doctor, he retorted. I see. Honestly, I have no idea why I was even sent here. This desolate clinic has to stay open, and I'm stuck sitting here all day. It's like being in a prison. I'm a skilled surgeon, for crying out loud. Why was I sent to this run-down clinic? Where do you live? I asked. There's a prefab shack behind the clinic. It's drafty, and summers are no better. I spend most of my time staring at the sea, he said with a hint of bitterness. Well, at least you get to relax, I replied. Relax? I used to live in a luxury apartment, and now I'm stuck in a shack. This isn't the life I worked so hard for, he fumed. Do your friends visit? They did, right after I got transferred, but they were expecting to see how lavish my life was. Instead, they found me here. They laughed, saying this was even more remote than they had imagined. Some even joked that I must have done something terrible to get sent here. They were right. He must have done something to deserve this transfer. Did he not realize that? What about Gabriella? I heard she came with you. Yay, about that. Bradley sighed deeply and looked up at the ceiling. About 3 months after we moved here, we had a huge fight, and Gabriella left. I chose her over you, Claire. And this is what I get. What caused such a big fight? She told me she loved me as a surgeon. But when I get stuck in this remote assignment, with a meager salary and this miserable life, she said she couldn't take it anymore. I kept telling her it was temporary, that I'd be called back to the main hospital eventually, but she wouldn't listen. That's what you fought about. Exactly. She kept complaining every day, saying how much she hated it here. Then one morning, I woke up, and she was gone, along with all her belongings. I see. Do you think she might have gone back to her family? Have you seen her? I haven't. If she were back in Chicago, I'm sure I'd have seen her by now. Yeah, I guess. Gabriella took all my savings when she left. Your savings? Yeah, she cleaned out my account. Now I'm barely scraping by. Not that there's much to spend money on around here anyway. There must be something here, though, I said, trying to console him. There's absolutely nothing here. No places to hang out. No stores to shop at. Sure, I don't spend much money, but mentally, it's crushing. Back in the city, I could just walk a little and find a grocery store or a supermarket. There were movie theaters, karaoke bars, you name it. Now, nothing at all. That's impressive, I replied. Yeah, the only thing here is nature. I've been so bored that I've memorized the names of seabirds. Well, that sounds like a peaceful life in its own way. Don't even start with that. I'm a surgeon, and I haven't held a scalpel in over a year. At this point, I'm not even sure I can perform surgeries when I get back to the main hospital. Why was I even sent here? I didn't do anything wrong. No surgical errors, no misdiagnoses, nothing. Are you sure you didn't do anything wrong? Absolutely. I've thought long and hard about it, but nothing comes to mind. So why did the hospital director ask you to come here? You don't have any connection to him, do you? Actually, the director is my uncle. What? You're kidding. I didn't know either until recently. But yeah, that's the deal. So what you're saying is that I ended up in this remote assignment because of you. It's not my fault. I didn't ask him to do anything. Yay, I suppose you're not the type to do something like that. But my father was furious, you know. He was at the wedding reception that day. And so was my uncle. They both saw your video. That's probably why you were reassigned. No way. If I'd known you were related to the hospital director, I wouldn't have done any of that. You shouldn't have done it even if you didn't know. Tell me, isn't the hospital struggling without me? I mean, a skilled surgeon like me is hard to replace. No one can perform flawless surgeries like I can. There's no need to worry. A new surgeon joined after you left. He's young but highly skilled. His diagnoses are accurate, and he's kind to the patients. He's very well regarded. That's ridiculous. There's no way some upstart could be any good. I've met him a few times. He's very pleasant and compassionate. Not the type to trample over people like you. Is that your new boyfriend or something? I don't have a boyfriend. After what you did, I haven't been interested in starting a new relationship. Can't stop thinking about me, huh? Don't flatter yourself. The only thing I can't forget is how terrible you were. Hey, can you talk to your uncle? Ask him to let me return to the main hospital. If I stay here any longer, my surgical skills will get rusty. Oh right, I brought something for you that might make you happy. What is it? If it's so great, hand it over already. I handed Bradley the envelope I had received from my uncle. An envelope. I was expecting something better, he muttered as he opened it. Then his eyes lit up with shock and excitement. Yes, I'm going back to the main hospital. It turned out to be a reassignment notice to the main hospital. But I couldn't help but wonder, if it was just a reassignment notice, was it really necessary for me to deliver it in person? You seem thrilled. Well, I'm heading back now. Come on, at least stay for a meal. Let's eat together. Do you even have proper food? Well, I've got instant ramen. Is that all you eat? How pitiful. With that, I left the clinic, feeling a small sense of satisfaction as my parting jab. But as it turned out, my father and uncle's real revenge was only just beginning. When Bradley returned to Chicago, he was summoned to the hospital director's office. He eagerly went, delighted about his reassignment. But when he arrived, he found not only my uncle, the director, but also Dr. Whitmore, the surgeon who had replaced him. "But what is this?" Bradley muttered, clearly taken aback. It made sense that the hospital director would be there, but seeing Dr. Whitmore, the surgeon who had replaced him, seemed to irritate him. "Dr. Cross, welcome back. You've done a great job during your time away," said the director warmly. Thank you," Bradley replied hesitantly. "Now let's get right to it. Can you start working tomorrow?" "Starting tomorrow? Is there a problem?" "Nope, not at all. I'd be happy to." Bradley was thrilled to be told he'd start working right away, taking it as a sign that his absence had been deeply felt. He was certain the hospital couldn't manage without him. "By the way," the director continued, "your new supervisor will be Dr. Whitmore. He's been with us for a year and is currently serving as the head of surgery. He's been a tremendous asset." "What, head of surgery, in just 1 year?" Bradley exclaimed, visibly upset. "Is there a problem?" the director asked with a raised eyebrow. "Director? A year? He's practically still a rookie. He's only been at this hospital for a year, but he honed his skills in Germany. His surgical expertise is nothing short of miraculous. Why do I have to work under someone like him?" Bradley demanded. "Why? Well, he's young, and I can see why you might feel that way. But exceptional talent belongs where it's most needed, wouldn't you agree? Then I deserve the same treatment. Up until a year ago, I was performing multiple surgeries a day. I should have been promoted by now." "I understand how you feel," the director said calmly. "But tell me, do you think a surgeon who hasn't held a scalpel for a year is fit for advanced surgery?" Bradley's face fell as the director's words hit a sore spot. He couldn't respond. "Don't worry," the director continued. "Take your time to regain your confidence and skills. Eventually, you'll find your rightful place." "Yes, I understand," Bradley replied, though his frustration was evident. Despite his displeasure, Bradley threw himself into his work, determined to prove himself. But Dr. Whitmore, the skilled and compassionate surgeon, was a tough supervisor. While he was kind to patients, he was unrelentingly strict with Bradley, leaving no room for errors. "Have you never read a single medical journal? What exactly were you doing for an entire year? I hear you barely had any patients at that remote clinic, so surely you had plenty of time to study. You're utterly useless. And to top it off, you say things that frighten patients. That's unacceptable behavior for a doctor." "I was just being honest with the patient," Bradley protested. "Honest? You gave them your incorrect diagnosis. That's not honesty. It's incompetence. Let me tell you something, your diagnosis was completely wrong. That condition can be cured with surgery now. But when I was practicing—" "Yes, when you were practicing. But that was over a year ago. In that time, new studies have been published, research has progressed, and what was once incurable is now treatable. I've performed that surgery multiple times successfully." "You've done it?" Bradley asked, astonished. "Of course I have." "Stop spreading baseless negativity. If that's all you can contribute, you shouldn't even be here." Dr. Whitmore's words shattered Bradley's pride entirely. By the time Bradley was mentally and physically drained, he was summoned to the director's office once again. This time, however, the room wasn't empty. The director, my father, Gabriella, and I were all there. "Debbie," Gabriella. What's she doing here? Bradley was overjoyed to see Gabrielle again, someone he had resigned himself to never meeting again. But his joy was short-lived as Gabriella swatted his hand away when he tried to take hers. Gabriella, there's no need to act so cold. Have you really become such a heartless woman? We're done, Bradley. We've been done for a long time. Is that so? Then give me back my money. I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't taken a single cent from you. Why would I bother with a broke doctor like you? You stole my savings. I said I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you're just paranoid. Dr. Cross, the director interjected sternly. This meeting isn't for you to argue about your personal matters. Please compose yourself. Yes, I'm sorry, Bradley mumbled, clearly embarrassed. Ms. Gabriella Foster, the director began. Yes, can you recount everything that happened during the wedding reception a year ago? Please stick to the facts. Yes, everything that happened that day was Bradley's idea. Gabriella began. What? That's not true. Bradley interjected. We started seeing each other a year before the reception. Gabriella continued, ignoring him. He was the one who asked me out. At first, I refused because he was my best friend's fiancé. But he insisted, and I eventually couldn't say no. He's a surgeon, makes good money, and showered me with gifts. I was drawn to that. About 6 months into our relationship, he told me he was going to marry Claire. As her best friend, I thought we had to end our relationship if he was getting married. But then he said he didn't want to get married. And what did you say to that? The director asked. I told him that if he didn't want to get married, he should break it off with Claire. But he said it would be more entertaining to break up at the last minute. When I heard his plan, I told him it was cruel and that he shouldn't do it. But he said, it'll be more fun this way, and I couldn't refuse. For the next 6 months, while Claire was busy planning the wedding, he kept making excuses and spent all his time with me. I knew how much Claire was looking forward to the wedding, and I thought it was terrible. At the same time, I started to lose faith in him for being so heartless. That's not true, Gabriella. That's completely false, Bradley shouted. Dr. Cross, you'll have your turn to speak. Ms. Foster, please continue, the director instructed. Of course. He asked me to go to Alaska with him, so I did. But I couldn't stop feeling guilty about betraying my best friend. And he acted as if nothing had happened. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and returned home. I'm sorry, Claire. I'm really sorry. I couldn't stand up to him when he told me to do those things, Gabriella said, tears streaming down her face. Her tears were so convincing that it was almost impossible not to believe her story. But Bradley vehemently objected. That's all lies. I was the one who said I couldn't be with Gabriella because I was engaged to Claire. But she kept pushing for a relationship. I thought it would just be a one-time thing, but I got pulled in deeper and deeper. When I tried to break it off, Gabriella refused. The idea to wait until the wedding day to end it, that was hers. I told her it was cruel and we shouldn't do it, but she said it would be more exciting that way. How dare you lie like that? I would never betray my best friend, Gabriella cried. At this point, it was impossible to tell who was telling the truth. But one thing was clear. What they did was inexcusable. I cannot forgive either of you for hurting my dear niece, the director said sternly. Dr. Cross, you're fired. What? But this was over a year ago, Bradley protested. The truth has only now come to light. This is the only course of action. You can't be serious. Devastated, Bradley begged to keep his job. But the director was firm. As Bradley left the office, Gabriella approached me. Claire, I'm so sorry, she said. But her apology didn't feel genuine. Thomas handed Gabriella a thick envelope. She eagerly checked its contents, a pleased smile spreading across her face, before leaving the director's office. "Thomas, what was that?" I asked, curiosity getting the better of me. I told her I'd pay her if she told the truth. She was quite cooperative, Thomas replied. This meant it was unclear whether Gabriella's story was entirely truthful or not. Regardless, Bradley's pride as a surgeon had been utterly destroyed. At this point, it was unlikely he would ever hold a scalpel again. Not only had his career been ruined, but his pride as a doctor had been completely shattered. With his dismissal from this hospital, there was no other path left for him to pursue. And so, the long-planned saga of revenge finally came to its conclusion. I later heard about what happened to him. He moved from one hospital to another, but even when he managed to get hired, he was deemed ineffective and quickly dismissed, having lost his place to work. He reportedly returned to his family home, but with his parents being doctors, and his siblings also in the medical profession, someone like him, who was deemed useless as a doctor, was not accepted as part of the family. As a result, he was thrown out of his family home. He was told that if he wanted to return, he would need to rebuild his career as a doctor, but with his mind and body completely exhausted, he no longer had the strength to do so. I wondered where he had ended up until I saw him at a grocery store near the hospital. He was wearing a store clerk's uniform, stocking shelves, and being scolded by a young part-time worker. The sight of him was pitiful, a far cry from the surgeon who had once performed numerous operations with pride. As for me, I've moved on and am happily immersed in a new romance. My partner is, of course, the brilliant and compassionate Dr. Whitmore, who replaced Bradley at the hospital. His kindness and warmth bring me a happiness I never thought I'd experience again.